am Vicki Hogarth and welcome to Southwest Magazine. For this edition, I sat down with New Brunswick Premier Brian Gallant at the CHCO studio to discuss how everything from trade with the U.S. to the legalization of cannabis will affect New Brunswick. We started off our conversation talking about why the Premier chose to host the recent summer meeting of Canada's premiers right here in St. Andrews.
Well, it was a real honor to be able to host all of my colleagues here in New Brunswick. It was a real honor as well to chair the meetings. Not always easy, I can tell you, when you're in that room trying to get all these people that have lots of opinions, of course, and that care deeply about their provinces and territories, and I would add the country. But with the work of everybody that's on the team, I think it went relatively well. We chose St. Andrews for a few reasons. First off, it's a special place for me. I got married here in October of last year at the Algonquin on the rooftop. We also, not a lot of people know this, but came here not too long before that to celebrate Christmas at the Algonquin with my family. So we really love it here for many reasons. And also one of those reasons is the fact that people are just so nice. And it reminds me a lot of my hometown in Shedag Bridge. People are just so salt of the earth. They're great people. They're grounded. And we really enjoy that, of course. The other reasons also is because we wanted to make sure that the premiers had a good time, their spouses, the delegates. Obviously, the reason we meet is for discussions on economic growth, healthcare, and strengthening educational opportunities. But at the same time, these people are going to be ambassadors for New Brunswick in the future. And I know that Charlotte County knows how to treat tourists right. They know how to make sure that they have a good time. So I think everybody that came, from the premiers themselves to their spouses to the delegates, left with a really good impression. And that would include the media as well who were here. Lots of national media would leave with great impressions of New Brunswick, which was good. And also the Algonquin itself is very used to organizing big events like this. They had the Trudeau cabinet come as well, and they know how to make sure the security, make sure that everybody feels welcome at the same time, balancing all of that. So they did a great job with many events, including this one. So lots of reasons why we wanted to come to Charlotte County and show all these people what we're all about here in New Brunswick.
One of the big talking points and the issues brought to the table was trade with the U.S. How do you see everything from news headlines to tariffs affecting New Brunswick as a whole?
Well, trade is very important to the New Brunswick economy. We are one of the most trade-oriented economies of all the provinces in Canada. So to make sure that we have robust trade with the U.S. is vital, but also making sure that we do everything we can to have our products and services going across the country in an effective way is important, and to other markets around the world. So we, over the course of our meetings with the premiers, discussed how we can ensure we have robust trade with the U.S., but also how can we do a better job internally across the country, making sure that our provinces and territories can get their products and services from coast to coast to coast, and how we can work together to diversify our markets so we don't depend as much as we do right now on the U.S., and that's certainly important for New Brunswick. We're one of the provinces that depends the most on the U.S. when it comes to exports. That's a good thing in a way, because I think any jurisdiction around the world would be happy to have a partner like the U.S. as its largest trading partner. So I think we should be proud of that, but we got to diversify so we don't have as much of a dependency.
And we're a border community, obviously. So I wonder, is there some positive benefit to it too? Do you see a lot of Canadians choosing to stay in Canada as opposed to even just doing groceries across the border?
I think there's some benefits that can come from it, there's no doubt. And I mean, there's lots of factors that go into trade with the U.S. I mean, the Canadian dollar is one of them as well. So when the Canadian dollar is maybe less competitive, you actually have a bit of an advantage when you're trying to export your products from here. And also, when you have people that may be a little upset with the U.S., they're going to decide to maybe take their vacation in Canada. And we've seen certainly people that have decided to, instead of going to New England states as an example, they'll come to Atlantic Canada and they'll come to New Brunswick to visit. So there are some advantages that come with it, but at the end of the day, there's no doubt that we want to ensure there's robust trade with the U.S., although there are some things that can happen that are quite positive when there's a little bit of a tit for tat there. It is really important nonetheless that we ensure we have robust trade in the long term. That's the best way to ensure economic prosperity moving forward.
And another economic point, and it's a health point too, and it's a federal issue, is the legalization of marijuana in October. How do you see that affecting New Brunswick? Everything from economics to healthcare, both positive and negative.
It's a major public policy shift. It's really important for us to remind ourselves of that. And the reason I say that is because inevitably there's going to be some hiccups. There's going to be some twists and turns. There's going to be some challenges we're going to have to work through. I think all the provinces have done well to work together to try to figure this out. how to best to regulate and protect people, keep them safe during production, distribution, and sales of cannabis once it's legalized for recreational use by the federal government. What I always tell people when there's a major public policy shift like this, we got to remember what the goals are. And the goals here, we got to get cannabis out of the hands of our youth, and we got to get the sales from selling cannabis out of the hands of criminals. Now, in parallel to all that, we're going to get ready, make sure we have the right regulations and enforcement of those regulations, but we're also going to look for the economic opportunities. And we believe there's going to be produced, cannabis is going to be produced somewhere in Canada. New Brunswick has a competitive advantage. We want those jobs. We want the investment, the capital investments that will be made. So we've been working hard in parallel to preparing for the legalization of cannabis for recreational use by the federal government by ensuring that we get some of the investments that are going to be made when it comes to production. And we're very happy that there's been hundreds of jobs created, hundreds of jobs that will be committed, capital investments being made in the province, and that's going to help stimulate the economy, and often in regions that certainly would welcome that type of investment.
It must be a complicated thing to sort of foresee. I mean, in terms of who will buy it legally, is that something that everyone across Canada is sort of struggling with to figure out?
Well, exactly. I mean, it's very important that we remember the goals, and the goal is to get the proceeds from selling cannabis out of the hands of criminals. So when we're putting in our processes and our price points and all of these things, we have to remember that if we don't do a good job, people may still continue to go to the illicit market. So it's very important for us to remind ourselves of what the goal is, and that's why we don't want to have the revenues come in terms of selling cannabis as a government for other investments. Really at this point it's just to offset the cost of the legalization of cannabis, and the reason we have that attitude is because we got to find out what the costs are going to be in the long term, and also because we don't want to put too much of a margin, because if we do, the illicit market will still be where people go, or some people will go to get cannabis. So we really got to make sure we have the right balance.
Mm-hmm. And it's obviously it's a controversial topic in terms of mental health. A lot of people believe it has really great health benefits and isn't addictive. Then there's the other side that thinks this is just a gateway to other things. Is there a plan in place for mental health or prevention of youth using marijuana?
Well, you're absolutely right to say that we want to ensure that people recognize that even though cannabis is being legalized, it doesn't mean that it's safe, or doesn't mean it's for everybody. So we have a robust awareness program to make sure people understand the rules, the consequences, the laws that will be put in place, and that's very important. And again, it all goes back to what the goals are. In fact, by legalizing cannabis, having the federal government legalize cannabis, we want youth to not use it at all, and we want to get it out of the hands of our youth. And again, we want to ensure that organized crime aren't benefiting from the fact that it's illegal at the moment and selling it themselves and getting the proceeds from it.
Speaking of youth, obviously education is a big part of your platform. And I know you started 2 businesses and were a tennis coach to put yourself through university. But what inspired you to care so much about making education and employment opportunities more available to New Brunswickers?
Well, you're right. I'm very passionate about education and training. It is the best way for us to have prosperity in the long term. Unfortunately, some of the investments take time. When you invest in literacy programs, when you invest to introduce coding in our schools, when you invest to reintroduce trades in our schools, it can take time to see the benefits of that. But our children are going to be better off. They're going to be able to build their careers here. They're going to be able to create their own jobs here. They're going to be able to fill the jobs that are here. So it really is, in my opinion, the best economic investment you can make. And it's also the best social equalizer. Giving the children the chance to have the best start in life is important. We also believe that we have to have a holistic approach to education. So that's why we created the free tuition program to allow low-income families the chance to go to university or college for free. It's also why we created the tuition relief for the middle class program that allows people that are in the middle class to get financial subsidies so they can go to university or college. And it's also why, through this holistic approach, that we created the childcare program that we've been investing in, where we're going to provide free childcare for those that need it the most. Low-income families will be able to see the parents get free childcare so they can go to work, or that they can go pursue their studies. And the middle class will get subsidies like they've never seen before to help with the cost of childcare as well, so the parents can get into the workplace and get into school if that's what they want to do. And that's going to help, obviously, the affordability of those families. So this is a holistic approach, and it's one of the best investments we can make for the future economic prosperity of our province and for the future social fabric, the quality of life of our province as well.
You went to the University of Moncton, and then you did your Master's of Law at McGill, and then you chose to come back. What is it about New Brunswick that made you come back? And do you see staying in or returning to New Brunswick as a trend for youth?
Well, you know, like a lot of New Brunswick families, when I was young, my father unfortunately lost his job. I was about 10 years old, and my mother was working at the Burger King in Moncton, and we went through some tough financial times. But I was very lucky to be in this province where people were there to support us, where I had mentors along the way, and I was able to go to university because I started 2 small businesses to be able to pay my way through it. And then I wanted to be involved in New Brunswick. I wanted to better New Brunswick, so I did go to McGill for a master's in law, which I really appreciated. It was nice to get a different perspective, but I definitely wanted to come back and make a difference here in our province. My mother's family is a Dutch family called the Scholtens that came to New Brunswick in 1952, and my grandparents came here with 17 kids. And they've started a new life for themselves, started in Minto, New Brunswick, and they were able to get ahead here and get support because New Brunswick is just a phenomenal place to be with phenomenal people. So I want to give back to this beautiful province, and it was always my intention to make sure I come back and make a difference.
I read somewhere that you became interested in politics in grade 5. Is that true? Was that always a goal?
Yeah, so in grade 5, I just randomly became the vice president of my class. And it all started there because I really enjoyed what I did, and I stayed involved in student politics in grade 6, grade 7, grade 8, grade 9, became the president of my high school, then the president of my university, and I decided that's what I want to do with my life. I said I want to do what I'm doing right now. The job description is you try to make a difference for your friends, for your school, for your community. And that's what I want to do, and I want to do that for the whole province. So I geared myself up to learn as much as I possibly could so I could become somebody that could make a difference in the province and somebody that could advance the quality of life for the people of our province.
I read too that you're a bit of a workaholic. So where did you meet Karine along the way, and how is she sort of hopefully taking you a little bit away from the office?
Well, absolutely. You're right to say that. Karine is fantastic. My wife is amazing. She's so patient. She's somebody that grounds me. She reminds me that there's life out of my job, outside of my job, and she reminds me of what's important in life. And I feel like I'm a better person because I found her as a life partner. But with that said, I'm very passionate about what I do. And I always tell people, if you're passionate about what you do, you love what you do, it's not work at all. So I really enjoy what I do. There's really tough days as Premier. There's really tough days when you're trying to make a difference in whatever capacity. But I can tell you that I'm very pleased to wake up every single day and have my job be do what you can to make life better for the province, for the people of this province. So I'm very lucky, and I'm also incredibly lucky to have Karine by my side and to have her be as patient as she is, because there are some long nights and some long weeks in the job for sure.
I know the federal carbon tax is something that everyone is dealing with provincially right now. What is your stance on it for New Brunswick?
Well, it's important that we have a Made in New Brunswick plan, and that's exactly what we're doing. One in which we're going to ask large emitters to pay their fair share when it comes to the emissions they're putting out, but a plan in which we are not going to ask consumers to pay any more, not 1 cent more. And this is the right approach for us. This is something that we believe is going to ensure that New Brunswick is going to be able to continue to grow as an economy. It's going to be able to ensure that life is affordable for families in the province, and that we do play the role that we need to play to combat climate change, which is humanity's largest challenge. So we all have a role to play, and New Brunswick's going to play it in a way that we ensure economic growth in the long term.
Speaking of the federal carbon tax, in terms of, and I think for a lot of people that factors in big business, you've been in a lot of ways standing up to big businesses and their influence in politics. How do you continue to do that, and how do you talk to people who think big business always influences politics?
Well, we need large businesses. They contribute to our economy. They create jobs. They are often anchor businesses that help smaller businesses by making them a part of their supply chains. But we also have to have large businesses pay their fair share, play a role in our society in making sure that those that are struggling to get ahead, much like my family was struggling when I was young, that they're supported. So we did raise taxes on the largest corporations in the province. We are going to put a plan in place where large emitters, large businesses that are large emitters, will pay their fair share when it comes to putting a price on carbon pollution. And we want to make sure that the wealthiest amongst us, the 1% wealthiest, pay a bit more. And it's never easy to ask somebody to pay a bit more. It's not easy, but it's something that we have to do, we think, so that we can help those in the middle class, those from low-income families, those that are struggling to get ahead, get the chance to have support from us through free childcare, through free tuition, and for the middle class, very significant financial support when it comes to childcare and tuition. We've raised the minimum wage as well to help ensure that those that are working hard in those jobs are able to get a little more money in their pocket so they can get ahead. And we understand as well that small businesses are crucial, and that's why, in fact, we've reduced small business taxes by 44% since we've been the government. So all of these initiatives we think is about fairness, it's about growing the economy in a way that's fair, that opportunities can be shared by all. And we're very pleased that the economy has grown every single year since we've been the government. The population has grown, exports have grown, wages have gone up, the deficit has been cut in by more than half. All the while, we've invested more in education and healthcare. So we really believe the way that we're going about it is working. And we plan to continue that work if we're given the chance to form the next government.
And a lot of jobs in this area depend on the Bay of Fundy. But at this point in time, the environment is also a big issue. Mm-hmm. How are you balancing the two, the need to protect the environment and the need to keep jobs in this area?
Well, it is a balance, but often they can go together, and it's important for us to innovate in the way that we do the development of our natural resources so we can do it in a sustainable way. And fish and seafood, I can tell you, is a very important component of our economy here in New Brunswick and certainly in Charlotte County. And that's exactly why when it comes to fish and seafood, we've been working hard to help them diversify their markets. Minister Rick Doucette's been working very hard to ensure that he goes into the markets, tell them what kind of products we have. And because of that, we've seen the exports from the fish and seafood industry grow in a very significant way over the last 4 years. We also understand that it's very important for tourism that we have a sustainable approach to development, because the water that surrounds our province often is a great driver for tourism. And I can tell you that we recognize that, and Minister John Ames certainly does as well, and we work very hard to make sure that we're showing people that we're going to make the right investments to make sure that we are protecting the environment, but that we're still developing our resources in a responsible and sustainable way. Also, that responsibility to do it in a sustainable way is also to ensure that these important industries are here for generations to come. So sometimes there is a balance to be struck. We think we're striking the right balance, and we believe that we can do this in New Brunswick in a way that's innovative, and we believe by listening to New Brunswickers, we're going to be able to ensure that these industries are important for many years to come.
For your last 4 years as Premier, what would you say are your biggest accomplishments, the things you're most proud of?
I think that the biggest accomplishment that people would probably look at in terms of what's important in New Brunswickers would certainly be the economic growth that we've seen. From the 4 years before we were the government, the economy actually shrank in this province, the only province of the country that saw its economy shrink. So since then we've been growing at a steady rate, which is something that's great. Unemployment rate went down significantly. Wages are up, which is good. But with all that said, I mean, that's certainly something that I think some of the pundits would say is a fairly strong accomplishment. For me, the one that I'm the most proud of is the free tuition program, the free childcare program. The free childcare program, just to be clear, is being rolled up across the province. So some of your viewers may say, well, I didn't hear about this, so it is going to be implemented by March 2019. These two programs, coupled with the relief we're giving to the middle class for tuition and childcare, I really think are going to be game changers for this province. It's going to help every single individual have a better quality of life. It's going to help every single family be able to get ahead a bit and be able to still pursue their studies and still be able to get into the workforce. And it's going to ensure we have a strong workforce for many years to come, which is one of the most important things for businesses to be able to compete from our province. So I really think those programs are going to make a big difference for families in the province, and it's going to ensure economic prosperity moving forward.
What have been some of the challenges either you didn't foresee or that have come about in terms, for instance, like the legalization of marijuana is a challenge? It could be something that turns out extremely positively, but what have you found to be something either you're still working on or turned out to be more complicated than you saw in the beginning? Well,
I think the first thing I would say is actually more of a structural issue. It's communicating with New Brunswickers. It's very difficult. We do the best we can to be able to listen, and that's probably a bit easier because you can go into the communities, you can meet with community leaders, you can do town halls, you can go to events and make sure that you listen to what's going on. But for us to be able to communicate what's happening and why we're doing things, I find very difficult. And it's unfortunate because I think it's important that people realize what we're doing, why we're doing it, and if they have questions that they're able to hear from us of what's going on. So I've always found being able to communicate is tough, and I think we're not the only ones going through that. I think in the age of social media, there's a lot coming at people. The New Brunswickers have lots of information coming at them about many things, many organizations, businesses, and all that jazz. So it's not easy for anyone right now to be able to communicate a message. So that I find a challenge. A more specific policy-oriented one. There was no doubt that for us, one of the things that we felt was a challenge was the fact that we have in this province wait times that people want to see improved in our healthcare system. And I say that's a challenge because it's one in which it's complex, and we're making investments to better the wait times. We're investing in our hospitals. We're investing in rural hospitals. We've ensured New Brunswickers that as long as we're the government, no rural hospital will be closed. We're investing to have more doctors. We have 90 more doctors since we've been the government. We're investing to have more nurse practitioners, allow advanced care paramedics to do their role, to be enhanced in their role, midwives to play the role they can play. We're investing to have seniors out of the hospital beds when they don't need them, so investing in nursing home and memory care beds. We're investing to reduce poverty through affordable housing, pay equity initiatives, raising the minimum wage. So I say all this because it's a very complex challenge. It's one that's existed in our province and country for years, if not decades, and it's going to take some real effort and initiatives to be able to get it to where we all want it to be. And I can tell you that we're committed to having this sort of holistic approach where we look at the quality of life of seniors, try to keep them in their homes as long as possible, which will help the system, going to the social determinants by reducing poverty in this province, which will help our healthcare system in the long term. Having the doctors, the specialists that we need, having the infrastructure that we need. So there's lots of investments that we've made to address the issue, but it is a challenge because it's a very complex one with a lot of moving pieces. So that would certainly be one that we're going to consistently focus on because we recognize how important it is to New Brunswickers. When you have a loved one that's sick, a loved one that's injured, there's nothing else that really matters. You want to make sure they get the health care they need and that they deserve in a timely fashion. So we recognize that, and we're going to continuously work on improving wait times.
I love living in a bilingual province, and it's the only official bilingual province. Is that an added challenge for you as Premier?
It's a benefit. Diversity is a benefit. Our country is strong because we're diverse, because we're inclusive, and because we have all these different cultures that make us who we are. But there's no doubt that means that we have to work very hard to ensure we're listening to all New Brunswickers, and in the case of our country, all Canadians. And that can certainly add to the challenges that I spoke to a while ago of ensuring that we communicate with New Brunswickers. So we need to make sure that we listen to all groups and we get a sense of what type of support they need and investments they need in their communities. But I can tell you that we have hundreds of millions of dollars that come into this province because we are officially bilingual. We have, I think, a stronger social fabric as well because we have the diversity of Francophones, Anglophones, First Nation communities. We have newcomers like my mother's family, the Schultons, that came here in 1952 from Holland. We have the Syrians that are here now. I mean, all of this diversity is really a strength. And I think as long as we always see it as a strength, we can figure out how to practically make sure we move forward together.
Some people say that Canada is a continent and not a country, but coming fresh off the Premier's meeting, do you think that there are qualities that are fundamentally Canadian that you noticed across the board with the Premiers of the different provinces and territories?
Well, I think we're proud. It's a great segue. I think we're all proud of the fact that we're diverse. I think we're all proud of the fact that we have different cultures in our country. I think it's a fantastic thing, and it builds a lot of strength, and it builds, I think, a country, a province where we can innovate because we have all these different opinions, different backgrounds, different ways of life. So I think that's a real strength. And I can tell you, when I have all the premiers together, whether it be in St. Andrews just a few days ago, or whether it be when I'm going to another meeting in Ottawa or wherever else, the premiers are always going to be advocating for their provinces and territories in a very passionate way. But they all are Canadian, and they all care about the country, and they all know that as a country we're in the same boat together. So it's really good to see people that are passionate about their communities, about their provinces and territories, but equally, if not even more passionate about the fact that we're all in this together as Canadians.
So if you're elected again this fall, what do you hope to accomplish next? What are your next wave of goals? Well,
I think we've started something really good. I think people can recognize that there are still challenges ahead of us. but that we over the last 4 years have worked very hard to overcome some of those challenges. We have an economy that's growing, a population that's growing, wages that are going up, we have the deficit going down, we have investments in education and healthcare that are in record amounts. We are working very hard to make sure that we overcome these challenges and we create an economy that is fair, that more people get to benefit from it. So if we're privileged enough to get the confidence of New Brunswickers yet again for another mandate, we want to continue to focus on growing the economy in a way that it works for more New Brunswickers, in a way that middle-class families and families that are struggling are able to get ahead. And I know what that's like. I lived it when I was young. Our family struggled like many New Brunswick families have. And I recognize what that can do to a family, what it can do to the individuals. So I want to help those families that are struggling like my family struggled when I was young. And I believe that we are on the right path. There are still lots of challenges, but if we work together, we can grow the economy to make sure it's a fair economy.
Thank you so much, Premier Gallant. It's always a pleasure, and thank you for making time for us at CHCO and our audience.
Thank you very much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be here in St. Andrews. Very kind.